In part 1, I talked about Barristan Selmy up to right after the Defiance of Duskendale, where he had his finest hour of rescuing King Ares II. Unfortunately, even though Barristan always felt the king was a bit mad, things got worse after rescuing Ares. The Mad King became more and more paranoid, convinced everyone was out to get him. So in the second and final part of this series, let's talk about Barristan the Bold, after Duskendale, to right before the books. In the last years of Ares II's reign, keeping his vows as a member of the Kingsguard became very hard for Barristan. After the Defiance of Duskendale, Ares II's madness became worse and more noticeable. The Mad King's paranoia grew so great he brought over Varys from Essos to operate as his spy master. Despite knowing there was always something wrong with Ares, Barristan believes the rot in Ares' reign truly began when Lord Varys came to serve the king. And worse did Ares' reign get. Barristan saw and heard his madness, but he would simply stand there, doing nothing against King Ares. Barristan knew the first duty of the Kingsguard was to defend the king they served from threats and any harm. They were charged with keeping the king's secrets, obeying all his commands, giving him counsel when requested, and keeping silent when it wasn't, to defend his name, his honor, and serve his pleasure. So as Sir Barristan watched others being harmed unjustly by the Mad King, Barristan stood by and let it happen. He even stood by when Ares brutally hurt his own wife and raped her. He knew that even if Ares II had told all the Kingsguard to defend his wife, they knew they were not to protect her from her own husband. So they let the abuse happen. But on a lighter note, even Kingsguard get to have fun and compete, and Barristan went to many tourneys. An tourney at Storm's End hosted by Lord Steffan Baratheon, Robert Baratheon's father. Before his death in 278 AC, Barristan remembers seeing Prince Rhaegar ride brilliantly. Between 278 AC and 281 AC, Barristan competed in the Old Town tourney and defeated and unmasked the Mystery Knight Black Shield, who was really the bastard of the Uplands. We don't know Black Shield's real name, but that he was probably a bastard in the Reach, where the tourney was held. Later, he would attend another tourney at Storm's End, where Barristan was the sole champion after unhorsing Robert Baratheon, Prince Oberyn Martell, Lord Jon Cunnington, Lord Jason Mallister, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, and Lord Leighton Hightower. Sadly, as Barristan would age, he would begin to confuse the tourneys who competed, when, and where. In 280 AC, Barristan was present during the lavish wedding of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Ilya Martell at the Grand Sept of Baelor in King's Landing. Barristan knew that while the Princess Ilya had a gentle heart, sweet wit, and was a good woman, kind and clever, that Prince Rhaegar was fond of Ilya, but not so much in love. But their marriage did seem much happier than Rhaegar's parents. Around 281 AC, the Kingswood Brotherhood became a problem for the realm. They were an outlaw organization that operated out of the Kingswood, hence Kingswood Brotherhood, and they had gained attention from their kidnapping of several nobles and evading capture, which was made harder as the small folk of the Kingswood were actually sheltering them. Having had enough of the Brotherhood, King Ares II decided they were a nuisance that needed to be handled and sent a royal force. Notably in the royal force was Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Barristan Selmy, but Lord Crackhall was also there and he brought two of his squires, one being Jaime Lannister. After Arthur Dayne convinced the small folk to stop aiding the Brotherhood, the royal forces were able to find them and defeat them. While Sir Arthur Dayne killed the Smiling Knight, Barristan Selmy killed Simon Toyne, and through Barristan's actions, he rescued Lady Jane Swan and her septa. After that, tension, which was already bad, became worse in 282 AC. During the year of the False Spring, the Tourney of Harrenhal was announced shortly after the Kingsguard Sir Oswell Went's brother visited him at King's Landing. Barristan thinks back sadly to this, believing that Prince Rhaegar hadn't trusted him with the same information he gave to other Kingsguards, such as Arthur Dayne, and that they had planned something with Oswell's brother's visit without him. Varys was also certain something was going on and began to convince the king that Rhaegar was plotting against him, and that the Tourney of Harrenhal was where he meant to hold this meeting. Varys' whispering finally succeeded, and Aerys II announced he would accompany his son Rhaegar to the tourney. Aerys believed that if he was there, how could they plot against him? So they traveled to Harrenhal for the 10-day event. During the opening ceremony, Lord Commander Gerald Hightower made Jaime Lannister a member of the Kingsguard at the command of King Aerys II. This is something Barristan wasn't really happy with. He considered Jaime too young and untried, not worthy of the White Cloak, which Jaime was the youngest knight in history to ever become part of their order, so maybe there was some or a lot of truth in that. But the tourney began with the competition lasting for 7 days. In the final tilt of the jousting event, Prince Rhaegar defeated Barristan and became the tourney champion over the Kingsguard. Upon winning, the prince crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty, much to the displeasure of many at the tourney. Barristan often looks back on this tourney in sadness, wishing he had been a better knight, believing if he had unhorsed the prince in that last tilt, as he had unhorsed so many others, he could have chosen the Queen of Love and Beauty, not Rhaegar. An event he believed set war and woe in action. Barristan believed that if he had won, he would have crowned Ilya Martell's companion, a young maiden new at court named Ashara Dane, a woman he secretly loved. Even in his old age, Barristan could still recall Ashara Dane's beauty. He could still see her long dark hair, her haunting purple eyes, her smile, and hear her laughter. He would always regret never telling her that he loved her, and would wonder if he had crowned Ashara the Queen of Love and Beauty. Would she have looked to him? Despite knowing it wouldn't do them any good, he was a Kingsguard, he had his vows, he couldn't help but think that if he had won and crowned her, she would have avoided the person that, allegedly, dishonored her at the tourney, which he believes led to her becoming pregnant, having a stillborn child, and jumping from the tower in grief afterwards. This failure haunted him the most his entire life. Whether the crowning of Ashara instead of Lyanna Stark could have avoided the rebellion, we'll never know. In 282 AC, Rhaegar abducted Lyanna and set a chain of events in motion that began Robert's rebellion. Being a Kingsguard of Aerys II, Barristan fought on the crown's side. I've also covered Robert's rebellion in many videos, but again for this video, I'll stay with what is relevant for Barristan. When Jon Cunnington was defeated at the Battle of the Bells, Aerys sent 2 of his Kingsguards, Barristan and Darry, to rally what was left of Cunnington's men to meet Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark in battle. They then joined up with Rhaegar Targaryen, who had finally turned up from the south and gathered together forces, and Lewin Martell, who commanded 10,000 Dornishmen. Together they met Robert Baratheon and the rebel forces on the Trident. At the Battle of the Trident, Barristan fought bravely and well beside his sworn brothers and Prince Rhaegar. He cut down a dozen good men that were both Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon's friends. But the battle ended with Robert Baratheon cutting down Rhaegar Targaryen and the Crown's forces losing. And at the end of the battle, Barristan was in rough shape. During the fighting, he took wounds from arrow, spear, and sword, and at the end of it, he was near death. When he was brought before Robert and Ned, not everyone wanted to spare the man, as he was a Targaryen loyalist. Roose Bolton tried to get the men to cut his throat, but Robert Baratheon instead said, "I will not kill a man for loyalty, nor for fighting well." Robert ordered for the man to be kept alive, and sent for his own maester to tend to Barristan. After Robert Baratheon was made king, Barristan accepted a full pardon from Robert and became his new Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Something some question, but Barristan took the position for many reasons. His king was dead, and Prince Viserys was only a boy who was years away from being fit to rule. And even so, Barristan had seen even as a child, Viserys was his father's son in all the ways Rhaegar wasn't. He feared Viserys would be a Mad King 2.0. As well, Robert was a good knight, honorable and brave, sparing his life and many others. Some might also say that Barristan needs a king to guard, and that he loved his honor, and so he took the position and kept his white cloak. All wasn't peachy with the Kingsguard though. After Aerys II was killed by Jaime Lannister, Barristan's disapproval of Jaime became even stronger. He would tell people that the Kingslayer should exchange his white cloak for a black cloak. However, with Sir Barristan now the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, serving alongside Jaime as a white cloak, they remain the only survivors of King Aerys VII. Despite that, Barristan still considered Jaime and some of the others that joined the Kingsguard during Robert's reign to soil the white cloak he wore. And others also believed after Aerys II's reign, the Kingsguard were never the same before, and they were somehow lesser. Nevertheless, Barristan kept his position and performed his duties as Lord Commander, which also included sitting on the small council. There he heard Varys making hundreds of reports over the years on every move Viserys Targaryen made in Essos. Then in 284 AC, once Lord Jon Arryn, the current Hand of the King, convinced King Robert Baratheon to marry Cersei Lannister to hold Tywin close to the crown, Barristan served in the honor guard that brought Lady Cersei to King's Landing to wed Robert. In 289 AC, Barristan was able to try himself in battle once more when the Iron Islands rebelled against the crown and Balon Greyjoy attempted to become the king of the islands. Balon believed that Robert the Usurper didn't have enough support from the other lords to stop him, and he figured he could defeat Robert at sea, winning independence for the Iron Islands. As most things turn out for the Greyjoys, the Greyjoy Rebellion didn't turn out well for Balon Greyjoy, which is not a surprise. Many lords played their part, but Barristan was the one that led the attack on Old Wick, while other areas were hit. The war ended with Balon Greyjoy kneeling for Robert Baratheon. Though some may say that Sir Barristan was the finest sword in the Seven Kingdoms in his youth, even in his advanced age, he would still best those 30 to 40 years his junior, especially in tournaments. At 57 years old, he competed in a tourney at King's Landing and was the champion. Despite being old, he was still considered to be made of true steel and be just as rigid. However, Sir Barristan Selmy was a changed man after Robert's rebellion. Following the Battle of the Trident and after recovering, Barristan would no longer sleep the whole night through. Grand Maester Pycelle would tell him that old men do not need as much sleep as the young. But Barristan knew it was more than that. He had reached an age where he was afraid if he closed his eyes, he might never open them again. And he wished to die a knight's death, not in his bed asleep. But it also began to pain the knight as he recalled the many things he watched King Aerys do during his reign. And he often wondered how much of the blood was on his hands for rescuing Aerys from Lord Darkland at Duskendale, for not allowing the king to potentially die in those dungeons so a better king, Rhaegar Targaryen, could take his place. He was convinced that Rhaegar would have made a finer king than any of those before and after him. He was also haunted by the thoughts of the dead Ilya Martell and her children, baby Aegon and Rhaenys, who he had failed to protect. Being so badly wounded at the Trident, Barristan had been spared the sight of the dead children, but he had often wondered, even as King Robert's Lord Commander, what Robert's response was to Tywin presenting the dead children. Barristan was certain that if Robert had smiled over the red ruins of Rhaegar's children, no army on this earth would have stopped him from killing the man. Barristan did not suffer the murder of children. Sir Barristan Selmy the Bold continued to serve as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard loyally for King Robert all his days. By the time of the first book, A Game of Thrones, Barristan had been a counselor in Kingsguard to 3 kings, Jaehaerys II, Aerys II, and Robert Baratheon. Even in the far north, singers would praise the deeds of Barristan the Bold, and it's said not a single person in the Seven Kingdoms doesn't know who Barristan Selmy is. The small folk would continue to talk about him and praise him as they did other legendary figures. So thank you for watching my video on Barristan. I'll be making a video with parts 1 and 2 together soon.